Ay, 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 yadai-dum. The Berditchever Nigun, this time sung by Yehuda Green from his album Land of Your Soul. Isn't it a shame to turn it off? How are you, my holy sisters and brothers? Let's light up the darkness. I'm in a great mood today. Received a bracha, a blessing from the Biala Rebbe this afternoon. I went to visit him. He's visiting LA. The Biala Rebbe is a direct descendant of one of the students of the Maggid of Mezrich, who was the student of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidic Judaism. Biala Rebbe is very special. I received a bracha from him years ago about a matter relating to our family, and you know, it was a very impactful and positive blessing in our lives. And I went back and saw him today, and he gave us some blessings for our family that were very special to us, and for Accidental Talmudist, that we should have great success and share, you know, so much Torah with so many people, even more than we can imagine. And a big blessing for our new movie, which you'll be hearing about. We're not quite ready to share much about it right now, but we have a new movie in the works that's pretty exciting, and you will hear more about that later. But he gave us a big bracha. We were very, delighted to also get the opportunity to support his charities. He runs schools and orphanages and food banks and all kinds of incredible good work in Israel. And then he gave us a gift, which was pretty amazing. Check this out. Isn't that amazing? So this, if you've been following us for a little while, will look familiar to Kaba Shofar Gadol LeHarosenu. Where have you seen that before? That's Yom Kippur of the Jubilee year, right? Sound the great shofar of our freedom, right? The Jubilee year in the Yovel, we blow the great shofar. And, you know, that when the Biala Rebbe gives you like a beautiful thing like this, you might think it's, you know, symbolic. It's just to put on the wall along with awards and trophies or something. But this is a real shofar. And, you know, he's given these shofarot to, you know, other people who have helped his causes and have a relationship with him. But he didn't really have someone who received the shofar and just went like this. It was a little not perfect right now, but it was awesome when I was actually with them. It like came out perfect the first time. And I said, "Oh, you're a Baltakia, a shofar blower." And I said, "Well, I sound the shofar regularly for our Accidental Talmudist community, especially every day in the month of Elul. So it's a big blessing that we received, and a blessing that this education that we enjoy, the class that we have together, and all that Nina and I share on Accidental Talmudist, that we should continue to have that opportunity to share it with you, my dear friends, and that more friends should join our community and receive these teachings that we're transmitting from the tradition." So a great day, really a great day. Who is with us as we gather to do some spectacular learning? Today's daf is awesome. I'm going to read the names quickly, and then we got to get into it because this is one of those days we're going to do the whole daf, the whole page here, Tainus 5. Also very special, last night we were at a benefit. That's why we had the class early yesterday to benefit Laniado Hospital, the hospital established in Israel, in Netanya by the Klausenberger Rebbe. And at the ceremony that attended this fundraiser last night, who was it? Dr. Lebovitz, who's also a great Torah scholar here in LA and the head of Agudas Yisrael, mentioned a teaching from Tainus Daf Hey, page 5, which is our page today. And I mean, and he mentioned, I mean, he knows very well that it's that on the Daf Yomi calendar, that's today's page. But I think he would have brought down that teaching. It was just relevant to what he was saying from the stage last night. So it was cool that it came out last night at a talk that we heard, and we'll be sharing that today, as well as everything else on today's daf. It's a great, great page. Renee in Indiana, Stephen in New Hampshire, John in Maine, Yehuda in South Carolina, Bill in Missouri, Melissa in Great Neck, Paul in the Great Northwest, what? I'm not sure what that means. Rochelle in Modesto. Rochelle in Modesto, Nancy, North Carolina. James says shalom. Sandy in Michigan. Tom in PA. Elvis in New York, in Geneva. Chandra says shalom. Shalom to you. That's a new name. Shandor, welcome. Lucy in Minnesota. PK in Texas, not in Colorado like usual. Welcome from Texas, PK. Tom. Oh, a very dear friend passed away last night at only 56. I'm 56. I'm so sorry to hear that. Baruch Dayan Emes. May your friend's memory always be for a blessing, and may his soul have a great elevation in the world of souls. Paul is in Chicago. Jose in Miami Lakes. Bill, you in a great mood? We never have been able to tell. Marion in Glendale, Pauline in Arkansas, Sammy in Dallas, and everybody's chiming in. Beautiful. It's so great to have you all with us. Okay, over there on the YouTube side, Marjorie in Virginia, Charles in Dallas, Submarine Radio Man in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Welcome, and Aoife in Florida, I believe, right? No Kala. Welcome, everybody. Okay, we are holding, this is Tainus Hey, Daf Hey, page 5, here in Tractate Tainus, the 10th volume of the Talmud. Generally speaking, the laws of public fast, but focusing on rain, and when the rain doesn't come is one of the instances when you might have a fast. Here in the early chapters, the early Mishnas of this tractate. Today we open Mishnah number 2 of chapter 1, and let's get into it because there's so much to cover. Mishnah number 2 of chapter 1 on page 5, Tractate Tainus. Until when, right? Mishnah number 1 was from when do we add the request for rain in our daily prayer? Mishnah number 2, until when does one request rain? In other words, when do we take that request out? We've already talked a little bit about this during our discussion of Mishnah number 1. We request it until Passover, until the first day of Passover. Rabbi Yehuda says we request rain until Passover has passed. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean the first day of Passover, the afternoon before Passover. When we reach the additional prayer is when it's been accepted on the first day of Passover. But Rabbi Meir says until the month of Nisan has ended, as it is stated, Joel 2:23, and he causes to come down for you the rain, the first rain and the last rain in the first month. Now, since the verse states that it rains in the month of Nisan, which is known as the first month, the month that contains Passover, this indicates that the entire month is considered part of the rainy season. That's according to Rabbi Meir. That's Mishnah number 2, the Gemara. Rav Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzhak. This interchange between Rav Nachman and Rabbi Yitzhak is going to lead very soon, in a few minutes, to the digressions of this page, which bring in all these beautiful homiletic teachings. Rav Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzhak, is the first rain in Nisan? The first rain is in Mar Cheshvan, meaning Cheshvan, which is the second month of the year according to the calendar, meaning if the first month is Tishrei, when we celebrate Rosh Hashanah, the next month is Cheshvan, last month, the month we just came out of recently. And that's why we say that we mention the rain from Shmini Atzeret, which is in Tishrei, and we request rain from December 5th on the solar calendar outside of Israel, and from the 7th of Cheshvan in Israel. We start asking for rain from the 7th of the Hebrew month of Cheshvan within the land of Israel. And so Rav Nachman is saying to Rabbi Yitzhak, what do you mean the first rain is in Nisan? The first rain is in Cheshvan. As we learned in a Baraisa, the first rain is in Mar Cheshvan, sometimes called Cheshvan, sometimes called Mar Cheshvan. And the last rain is in Nisan. And Rabbi Yitzhak said to Rav Nachman that Rabbi Yochanan said as follows: this verse was fulfilled in the days of the prophet Joel, or Yoel, that's my Hebrew name, the son of Pesuel, in a year concerning which it is written, that which the palmer worm has left, the locust has eaten, and that which the locust has left, the cankerworm has eaten, and that which the cankerworm has left, the caterpillar has eaten. That's Joel 1:4. When no crops remained, in that year, the month of Adar, that's the month before Nisan, right? The month with Purim in it. In that year, the month of Adar ended and still no rain had fallen. The rain of the first rainy season fell for them on the 1st of Nisan, right? Why do we start asking for rain in the land of Israel in Cheshvan? Not just mentioning that God is the one who brings the rain, but asking him to let it rain. We start asking in Cheshvan because that's right then when the rainy season starts in Israel, right? It's the fall and winter is the rainy season in the Holy Land. And here they're telling us that year, it never rained. Throughout the whole rainy season, when you expect the rain to come, right, from our calendar, what we're familiar with, what we're used to, October, November, December, January, February, March, usually Adar is around March, and it hadn't rained in all that time. In Israel, it doesn't rain in the summer at all. Okay, so May to September, no rain. So if it hasn't rained by March, when you need that rain to come down and water the crops, that's a year of terrible drought, and the people are going to go hungry, right? That was a terrible, terrible year. After the first rain fell, right, which didn't come until Adar, after that first rain finally fell, the prophet Yoel, said to the Jews, go out and sow, go out and plant. They said to him, well, one who has a kav of wheat, a measure of wheat, or 2 kav of barley left, right, in their storehouse, they've got a little bit of wheat or a little bit of barley left, should he eat them and live off them for a while? Because they're hungry. These people are hungry. The reason they have only that much left is because they've been eating, rationing it out, I'm sure, but there's just very little food left in their storehouses. Now, should they plant that wheat or that barley so that they'll have what to eat when they harvest? But how many months will that take? The rain is already so late. Maybe we should just eat the little bit of grain that we have left because we're so hungry. Given the improbability that the crops will grow under these circumstances, right? Normally they sow in the fall and it grows all through the winter season in the Holy Land. And now, nothing grew. Because there was drought all winter. And should they plant now? I mean, it's like, okay, a little rain came, but probably if we put this in the ground, no more rain will come. And whatever little we have left that we could be eating, we'll plant it in the ground hoping it will grow, but it won't grow. And then we'll totally starve. We'll have nothing. And the prophet said to them, nevertheless, go out and sow, plant it. A miracle occurred for them, and they discovered wheat and barley seeds that were hidden in the walls and that were concealed in ant holes. So I'm not sure whether they planted what was in their storehouses and then found some more to eat, or they could eat what was in their storehouses because they found what to plant. Anyway, they went out and sowed on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th days of Nisan, the very end of the rainy season, right? This is just 10 days before Passover. And the rain of the second, this late rainy season, fell for them on the 5th of Nisan. They planted on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, right? The Passover is on the 15th, so now the rain came on the 5th. So that's 10 days before Passover. And the crops grew so quickly that they were able to sacrifice the Omer offering in its proper time on the 16th of Nisan. It grew in 11 days, enough that they had what to harvest and bring as the Omer offering at the temple that year. Consequently, grain that normally grows in 6 months grew in 11 days. And consequently, the Omer that is generally sacrificed from grain that grows in those 6 months was sacrificed that year from grain that grew in 11 days. And with regard to that generation, the verse states, "They who sow in tears shall reap with songs of joy. Though he goes on his way weeping, who bears the measure of seed, he shall come home with joy, bearing his sheaves." That's Psalm 126, verse 6. And the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the expression, "though he goes on his way weeping, who bears the measure of seed"? And Rabbi Yehuda said, an ox, when it plowed at that time, it went on its way weeping and lamenting its labor, thinking it's planting for no good reason. And yet, upon its return through the same furrow, it was able to eat the young shoots of crops that had already sprouted from the furrow, right? So look at that beautiful imagery. The farmer is plowing his field with his ox, right? And they're like breaking up this very rough, tough dirt that hasn't rained all through the rainy season. They're plowing it up, putting in the seed, and when the ox is coming back along the same furrow, it's already growing enough for the ox to eat some of it. Where am I? Yeah. In the same furrow that already sprouted from the furrow. And this is the meaning of the phrase, "He shall come home with songs of joy." And the Gemara further asks, what is the meaning of the expression, "bearing his sheaves"? And Rav Nachman said, and some say this was taught in a baraisa, the stalk of that crop was 1 span, i.e. the distance between the thumb and the little finger, while the ear itself was 2 spans, i.e. the ears of grain were twice as long as the stalk, whereas usually the stalk is 3 or 4 times longer than the ear. The people had prayed, they had been afraid, they thought they might starve to death, but their prayers were answered. And when God answers your prayers, he doesn't hold back. And so it was not only incredibly fast developing grain, but extremely, abundant, right? An abundance of grain on those stalks. Incidental to the interpretation of these verses, the Gemara, so far what we've been talking about is a passage from the Bible that discussed when rain came, and a particular incident in history discussed in the book of Joel, because the sages are deriving when are the early rains and the late rains, until when should we be asking God for rain, because once the rainy season ends, no more rain is going to come in the normal course of things, and we shouldn't be asking God to send rain. That's why we don't ask for rain during the summer months. Now though, and we got there through this discussion of Rav Nachman and Rabbi Yitzhak. Now we're entering the digression. Incidental to the interpretation of these verses, the Gemara cites a series of verses starting with the topic of hunger that also involve questions that Rav Nachman posed to Rabbi Yitzhak. And Rav Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzhak, what is the meaning of that which is written? For the Lord has called upon a famine, and it shall also come upon the land 7 years. This is not the Joseph story in Egypt. This is from the second book of Kings, chapter 8, verse 1. Specifically, in those 7 years, what did they eat? Okay, that was a famine that lasted the full 7 years. What did they eat? And Rabbi Yitzhak said to Rabbi Nachman that Rabbi Yochanan said as follows. In the first year, they ate that which was in their houses. In the second year, they ate that which was in their fields. In the third year, they ate the meat of their remaining kosher animals. In the fourth year, they ate the meat of their remaining non-kosher animals because they were starving. In the fifth year, they ate the meat of repugnant creatures and creeping animals, i.e. any insects they found. In the sixth year, they ate the flesh of their sons and daughters. And in the seventh year, they ate the flesh of their own arms, to fulfill that which is stated in Isaiah 9:19, each man shall eat the flesh of his own arm. This is to tell you how terrible that famine was. And Rav Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzhak, what is the meaning of that which is written? It is sacred in your... And by the way, that famine described in the second book of Kings afflicted the people in the days of Jehoram, the king of Israel. And that's what the famine that we're talking about there. And Rav Nachman, another question. And Rav Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzhak, what is the meaning of that which is written? It is sacred in your midst, and I will not enter the city. That's from Hosea 11:9. This verse is puzzling because it is sacred in your midst. Will God not enter the city? Right? If something is sacred, that means that God's presence would come to the city, right? Why would God avoid a city that has something sacred in it, that is holy? And Rabbi Yitzhak said to Rav Nachman that Rabbi Yochanan said, our verse should be understood as follows. The Holy One, blessed be He, said, I shall not enter Jerusalem above in heaven until I enter Jerusalem on earth down below at the time of the redemption, when it will be sacred in your midst. And the Gemara asks, and is there such a place as Jerusalem above? And the Gemara answers, yes. It is written, Jerusalem built up a city unified together. That's Psalm 122, verse 3. The term unified indicates that there are two cities of Jerusalem, a heavenly one and an earthly one, which are bound together. So they're going to go on to a new topic in a moment, but let's just dwell on that image for a moment. So the Jerusalem we know is the Jerusalem on earth. And of course, it's a sacred place, but it isn't fully sacred in our midst because the temple hasn't been rebuilt. At the time of the redemption, when the Messiah will come, Mashiach, and the third temple will be built. So then, God's presence will enter once again into the temple within Jerusalem. And at that time, God is saying he will also re-enter the Jerusalem above, this spiritual Jerusalem, which is in heaven, but that also is a place that is waiting for that final redemption. So even in heaven, there's a place set apart and waiting for that final redemption. New subject. And Rav Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzhak, what is the meaning of that which is written? Jeremiah 10:8. And with one they are brutish and foolish. The teaching of their vanity is a stock. Rabbi Yitzhak said to Rabbi Nachman that Rabbi Yochanan said as follows, there is one transgression that causes the wicked to burn in Gehenna. What is this transgression? Idol worship. This can be proven by a verbal analogy. It is written here, the teaching of their vanity, Hevel, is a stock, and it is written there with regard to idols, they are vanity, Hevel, a work of delusion. Jeremiah 10:15. Another verse. And Rav Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzhak, what is the meaning of that which is written? For my people have committed two evils. Jeremiah 2:13. Now, were there only two evils that they performed? Were then the 24 violations listed in the book of Ezekiel abandoned, i.e. they were pardoned? And Rabbi Yitzhak said to Rav Nachman that Rabbi Yochanan said as follows, they have violated one transgression that is equivalent to two. And what is this sin? Idol worship. As it is written, Jeremiah 2:13, for my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, to hew for themselves cisterns, broken cisterns, right? Jeremiah was saying, what's wrong with you people? You're in a direct relationship with God in heaven, and you turn your back on God and build idols and look to them for your salvation? What's wrong with you? And that's a double wickedness. Not only are you turning your back on the Holy One, but you're building a false idol and to call it your God, and it's dreck. It's garbage, that idol, right? You have the fountain of living waters who loves you and wants to be in a relationship with you, and instead you look to a broken cistern for your water? And it is written about the Jewish people, for pass over the isles of the Kittim and see, and send to Kedar and observe carefully and see if there has ever been such a thing. Has a nation exchanged its gods, although they are no gods? But my people has exchanged its glory, its relationship with God, for that which does not profit, idols. And it is taught in a Baraisa with regard to this verse, the Kittites, i.e. the people of the Isles of Kittim, worship fire, and the people of Kedar worship water. And even though they know that water extinguishes fire, nevertheless, they have not exchanged their God. But my people has exchanged its glory for that which does not profit, right? So Jeremiah is making the analogy that here's a people that worships fire, even though they know that nearby there's another people that worships water, and water can easily put out fire, and still they stay true to their God of fire. But the Jews who have, the God, the most powerful ever, the only God in the world, and yet they exchange him for, this worship of idols. And tragically, it happened, right? In ancient Israel, there were times when these evil kings would rise up and allow idolatry. And obviously not the whole population, thank God, but, some number of people went after idols, went after the gods of others. And God does not like that, as we know. God hates idolatry. And Rav Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzhak about a different verse. What is the meaning of that which is written? And it came to pass when Shmuel was old. 1 Samuel 8:1. It came to pass when Shmuel was old. And did Shmuel really grow old? But he was only 52 years old when he died. As the master said in a Baraisa that deals with the divine punishment of Karas, right? Excision, death at the hands of the heavenly court. One who dies at the age of 52 years is not considered to have suffered the premature death of Karas, as this is the age of the death of Shmuel the Ramisi. Shmuel, the prophet Samuel who anointed Saul as king. And this shows that Samuel died at the relatively young age of 52. And Rabbi Yitzhak said to Rav Nachman that Rabbi Yochanan said as follows: old age sprang upon Samuel, which caused him to appear older than his actual age. As it is written, 1 Samuel 15:11, I regret that I made Saul king. Samuel said before God, Master of the universe, you have considered me the equivalent of Moses and Aaron, as it is written, Moses and Aaron among his priests, and Samuel among those who call upon his name. That's Psalm 99. We sing that on Friday nights. And just as with regard to Moses and Aaron, their handiwork was not annulled in their lifetimes, so too, let my handiwork, says Samuel, not be annulled in my lifetime. His handiwork was to appoint Saul king. God regretted making Saul king and was going to, take the kingship away from him and give it to David. But it's like this is a sort of, imagined conversation where Saul is saying, come on, but, at least don't do that in my lifetime. Let Saul be still king until I die. I anointed Saul, please do not annul his reign. And the Holy One, blessed be he, said to himself, right? God speaking to himself, what shall I do? Shall Saul die now? Samuel will not allow it, as he has petitioned that Saul should not die. Shall Samuel die young, with Saul passing away immediately afterward? But the people will murmur about him and wonder what transgression Samuel committed that caused his early demise. Shall neither Saul nor Samuel die? But the time of David's reign has already arrived, and one kingdom does not overlap with another and subtract from the time allotted to it, even by a hairbreadth. That's a teaching we've seen earlier, right? One kingdom is elderly. And this is the meaning of that which is written, and Saul dwelled in Gibeah under the tamarisk tree in Ramah. 1 Samuel 22:6. What does Gibeah have to do with Ramah? These are two separate places. Rather, the verse comes to tell you who caused Saul to dwell in Gibeah for 2.5 years. The prayer of Shmuel Haramati, right? The prayer of Shmuel of Ramah, Samuel. And the Gemara asks, and is one man set aside before another man? In other words, is Samuel's life set aside, meaning ended early, simply because the time for David's reign has arrived? And the Gemara answers, yes. As Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani said, that Rabbi Yochanan said, what is the meaning of that which is written? Therefore I've hewn by the prophets, I've slain them by the words of my mouth. Hosea 6:5. It is not stated by their deeds, but rather by the words of my mouth, i.e., God sometimes ends the life of an individual simply by virtue of his decree. Apparently, one man is indeed set aside before another man. And that's actually an important teaching for us to understand because, whereas, in ancient times, there was this idea that, well, if somebody died early, maybe it's because they committed some evil. But here we see that no, sometimes God has his own purposes for ending somebody's life at a young age. We don't understand what it is. It's just God decreed it. And there was a reason for it. God has a reason. We won't understand it. Perhaps not now, certainly. Perhaps when we get to the world to come. Perhaps at the time of the resurrection of the dead. And perhaps we'll never really understand it. But God has reasons for what God does. In continuation of Rav Nachman's questions of Rabbi Yitzhak, the Gemara relates, Rav Nachman and Rabbi Yitzhak were sitting and eating together at a meal. And Rav Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzhak, let the master say a matter, i.e., share a Torah idea with me, right? Rav Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzhak, teach me something, teach me some Torah. And Rabbi Yitzhak said to Rav Nachman that Rabbi Yochanan said, have you got the picture? Rabbi Yitzhak was definitely a disciple of Rabbi Yochanan. Because every time Rav Nachman asks a question, Rabbi Yitzhak quotes Rabbi Yochanan. So here's a matter of Torah that Rav Nachman received from Rabbi Yitzhak in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. One may not speak during a meal, lest the esophagus will precede the trachea. Food is meant to enter the esophagus, and when one speaks, his trachea opens and the food might enter there, and therefore one should not speak during a meal, as he might come into danger of choking. Don't talk with food in your mouth. Very good teaching. Now it says one may not speak during a meal. What is the law? It is prohibited to converse during a meal, even if the topic is matters of Torah. That's according to Magen Avraham. Some say that one may converse between courses, whereas others prohibit even this. In modern times, people are not stringent in this regard, as the stringency was apparently related to the practice of eating while reclining, right? In ancient times, they didn't sit in chairs upright, right? Like we do at Passover, they were like leaning to their side, even lying on their side in the manner of nobles, rich people who would dine, like Greek nobles reclining on their sides. Poor people maybe on the ground, the rich people on sort of day beds, right? And so they're lying sideways, much even increases the danger that you'll choke if you're talking while you're eating. Okay, so, maybe we're allowed to talk during meals, that we see that we don't follow this halakha in modern times, but you should never talk with food in your mouth, right? Maybe it doesn't need saying, maybe it does need saying. After they had eaten, Rabbi Yitzhak said to Rav Nachman that Rabbi Yochanan said as follows. Our patriarch Jacob, right, so he said to him, teach me something. Well, they were having a meal together. He said, teach me some Torah. So first he said, well, Rabbi Yochanan said, don't talk while you're eating. So I guess there was no more conversation during the meal. After they had eaten, Rabbi Yitzhak said to Rav Nachman that Rabbi Yochanan said as follows. And this was the teaching we heard last night at the talk, at the fundraiser for Laniado Hospital. Our patriarch Jacob did not die. What? Haven't we read the story? Aren't we going to read the story actually in just a few Torah portions? That after the Jews went down into Egypt following Joseph there, right? Joseph, who interpreted Pharaoh's dream about the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine. And then, because he interpreted correctly, Pharaoh made him the overseer over Egypt, and they collected all the food for 7 years. And then during the 7 years of famine, the only place in the world where there was food was in Egypt. And that's why Jacob and all his sons ended up coming to Egypt and joining Joseph there. And Jacob said to his son Joseph, "Do not bury me in Egypt. Take me back to Israel." And so they did that. When Jacob died, they sent this huge procession. And even Pharaoh's nobles went with it. Many, many wagons. And all of Jacob's family, all his sons, went together with Joseph back up to Israel. And they buried Jacob where? In Hebron, in the cave of Machpelah, where Abraham and Sarah and Yitzhak and Rivka are also buried. And so we read that in the Torah, that Jacob died and was taken back to Israel and was buried in that cave along with Abraham and Yitzhak. So how could Rabbi Yochanan say our patriarch Jacob did not die? And Rav Nachman asked in surprise, was it for naught that the eulogizers eulogized him and the embalmers of Egypt embalmed him and the buriers buried him? And Rabbi Yitzhak replied to Rav Nachman, I am interpreting a verse. As it is stated, Jeremiah 30:10, therefore do not fear Jacob my servant, says the Lord, neither be dismayed, Israel. Jacob's name was changed to Israel. For I will save you from afar and your seed from the land of their captivity. Now this verse juxtaposes Jacob to his seed. Just as his seed is alive when redeemed, so too Jacob himself is alive. So here's the idea that if you're able to transmit your values to your children, to the next generation, and they're able to transmit your values to the generation after them, then you remain alive. Right? Not just in their memories, which is very important, obviously, that we remember, when we lose, the previous generation, the generation before that, our grandparents, their parents, etc. And we try to remember them and remember their names. But it's even greater when we receive their values and we embody those values and we live up to those values. Then they are truly alive, right? And if they were supporting institutions like a hospital, like a school, like a food bank, and we continue that holy work, then they remain alive through us. And Rabbi Yitzhak said, and also, then there's a note here. So why don't we say that Abraham is still alive or that Yitzhak is still alive? How is Jacob the one who is recognized that way? And the difference is that all of Jacob's children embodied those values and transmitted those holy values on. Abraham had two sons, right? He had Yitzhak, but he also had Ishmael, who didn't transmit those Torah values. And the Torah wasn't revealed yet, but it wasn't, the covenant of Judaism wasn't through Ishmael. And Yitzhak had two sons, right? Jacob and his twin brother Esau, Asaph. And Asaph did not live up to those values. And Rabbi Yitzhak said, anyone who says, now another teaching, Rabbi Yitzhak says, anyone who says Rahav, Rahav, Rachav, Rachav, immediately experiences a seminal emission due to the arousal of desire caused by Rachav's great beauty. Who is Rachav? When, in the book of Joshua, right? The book of Joshua. So after, Moses dies at the end of the book of Deuteronomy, now Joshua leads the people into the promised land. and they have that encounter at Jericho, and they send, 2 scouts in to see what's going on, and they end up getting hidden by the courtesan, Rahav, but she recognizes the holiness of this new people who's coming into the land, and she sort of, reforms and repents, and is no longer living as a prostitute, but in fact ends up married to Joshua, the great tzaddik, righteous person and leader of the Jewish people. And her beauty was so great that anyone who just hears her name, would have like a, would have a sexual emission. And Rav Nachman said to him, I say Rahav, and it does not affect me. And Rabbi Yitzhak said to Rav Nachman, when I said this, I was specifically referring to a man who knew her in person and to one who recognized her. With regard to anyone who met Rahav in person, the mere mention of her name would be enough to arouse his lust. And the Gemara relates, when they were taking leave of one another, when this meal ended, and I'm almost done, so if you've got questions or comments, get them in. We're going to complete the whole daf. We're reading the whole page today. Where am I? When they were taking leave of one another, Rav Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzhak, Master, give me a blessing, right? As I went to the Biala Rebbe today to get a blessing. So Rav Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzhak, give me a blessing. And Rabbi Yitzhak said to him, I will tell you a parable. To what is this matter comparable? It is comparable to one who is walking through a desert and who was hungry, tired, and thirsty. And he found a tree whose fruits were sweet and whose shade was pleasant, and a stream of water flowed beneath it. He ate from the fruits of the tree, drank from the water in the stream, and sat in the shade of the tree, right? So somebody who's, like dying of thirst, dying of hunger, baking in the sun, comes to an oasis, right? He comes to this beautiful tree, and now he's able to eat the fruit of the tree, drink the water that runs under the tree, and be cooled down in the shade of the tree. And when he wished to leave, this person, now he's refreshed, he said, Tree, tree, with what shall I bless you? If I say to you that your fruits should be sweet, but your fruits are already sweet. If I say that your shade should be pleasant, your shade is already pleasant. And if I say that a stream of water should flow beneath you, a stream of water already flows beneath you. Rather, I will bless you as follows. May it be God's will that all saplings which they plant from you should be like you. And so it is with you, Rav Nachman, right? Rabbi Yitzhak says to Rav Nachman, and so it is with you. With what shall I bless you? If I bless you with Torah, you already have Torah. If I bless you with wealth, you already have wealth. And if I bless you with children, you already have children. Rather, may it be God's will that your offspring shall be like you. What a beautiful compliment and blessing you could give your friend who seemingly has, so much in this world. They seem happy, they're educated, they have a Torah education, they have children, and so you bless them that their children should be like them. A beautiful, beautiful compliment and blessing. Okay, questions or comments? On Tainus Daf Hey, Tainus page 5. Here we go. Bill, so very much of my own theological work is on the idea of the heavenly city, Jerusalem eternal, the city of God, as a vision of the community that God wants us to have with one another and with God's self. I love the image of that heavenly city, so very, very much may it come swiftly to us. Amen. Elvis Nixon, as we recite daily prayers, we are cautioned, beware that your heart not be seduced and you go astray and worship other gods and bow down to them, for then the wrath of Hashem will blaze against you. This is the second paragraph of the Shema. And the heavens will be held back, and there will be no rain, and the ground will not yield its produce, and you will quickly perish from the good land which Hashem is giving you. Now, this is clearly responding to when I earlier said that God does not like idolatry. Yea, God hates idolatry. And you could think of it as this: God gives us everything, and then we turn our back and worship, idols made of stone or wood. It's an insult. It's an insult to the Holy One. Of course he hates it. Why wouldn't he hate it? All right, my friends, that's what I've got for us today. Today we did the whole daf, not the whole Megillah, that old expression, the whole Megillah. We'll be talking about the Megillah in our next tractate. The next tractate is Tractate Megillah. But at any rate, we did the whole daf today, and with God's help, we'll do daf Vav tomorrow, page 6 here in Tractate Tainus. And then recall, we'll have a show tomorrow, but then Friday and Saturday, I'll be off. We're going on a Shabbaton with our minyan, and with God's help, we'll be back on Sunday, and we'll do a triple daf on Sunday night. But first, we'll have class tomorrow at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific, God willing. Have a great night.